You're listening to Community Health Watch on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven's home for community radio. Insightful conversations, impactful ideas, and voices shaping our community and beyond. Let's begin the dialogue.
Good morning and welcome to the Cultural Ambassador Community Health Watch program. Today our topic is From Donation to Discovery, Yale's Legacy Tissue Donation Program and the Yale Biorepository Program at Yale. I'm Leroy Odingapere, pastor of St. Stephen's, and co-hosting with me is the Reverend Alvin Clayton, pastor of the fastest growing church in Bridgeport, Walters Memorial AME Zion Church. And our guests are Dr. Harold Sanchez and Dr. David Sarpong and Dr. D'Estasio. Did I get it right?
That's right.
Oh, that's a beautiful thing. So gentlemen, you know, I think the reason we wanted you to be on the show is because we feel that the subject and the study that you're doing is so important in our community, but also in the world. And getting people involved or knowledgeable about it, I think is important. So we're going to break down some of the big words like biorepository and let people know that it's a facility that takes in blood, tissues, and samples and is often used in research. So I broke down one of the big words. I'm going to leave the other big words to you guys. As we proceed on. And I wanted to also preface the show by saying that we grew up with an understanding of biorepositories in World War II under the kind of leadership of Dr. Charles Drew. And because of that history of him and the blood banks that he used to save lives. In 1950, he was in a car accident and he himself needed a transfusion. And the White Hospital, he wasn't sure he could get in. The Black Hospital was around close enough for him to get to, but people still believed that if he'd been able to get to a better hospital, he might have been alive. The man who did so much for blood plasma. And then there's also the thing of, and we talked about it, Dr. Sanchez and Dr. Sarpong, about people, grave robbers, who in early medical schools in this country would go in and extrapolate tissue and bones after the bodies had been buried and then told nobody about it. And then there's the Henrietta Lacks story. So the stories go on and on. And then, you know, with the segregation in this country with blood banks, even initially, I think that it raises some questions of where we are now and, you know, where we need to go. So, gentlemen, I'm going to give you the opportunity to, we'll start with Dr. Sanchez to tell us about the work you're doing, why it's important, and then Dr. Sarpong, you can tell us about the work you've done and is doing, and so people can know who we're talking with.
Well, thank you very much, Reverend Peyton, and Reverend Clayton, Reverend Perry, for inviting us. And
Got a new name.
So the work we do. So I'm the director of something called the Legacy Tissue Donation Program, co-director actually with Marcello D'Estasio. And it's a program that's been operational for the last 2 years or so. What we try to do is that we try to match people who want to donate tissue after they die to science, to research. with laboratories here at the medical school and at the hospital who need that tissue to do the kind of research that they're doing. And this is the sort of thing that has, it's been done elsewhere. There are some unique aspects of our program that I'd be happy to talk about later. But basically, the idea is that we provide a service that allows people who really want to do something to advance science. It's a remarkable gift that they provide, and it provides types of research that are just impossible any other way. And actually, if it's okay with you, Reverend, I'd like to let Marcello, who actually uses some of the tissue that's been donated, to say a few words about that.
Well, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I would echo Dr. Sanchez's point that it is really remarkable, these donations. So in my other hat that I wear, in addition to being the co-director here, I do run a research lab. We study brain diseases and the interactions between the immune system and the brain. So I know firsthand, what the challenges are in studying human disease. And there are a lot of tools that we have, especially in the modern era. There are so many just amazing technologies, amazing things that we can do to investigate pieces of biology and understand them better. But in order to use those to really understand diseases and search for new treatments for those diseases, we need to be able to study the tissues that are affected by those diseases. Now, there are other tools that people use, things like animal models and things like cultured cell lines. But those are model systems. Those are designed to have features that are of biology that are like the disease, but they're not the real thing itself. They're not the disease itself, the tissue that's really affected. And so in order to use all these really incredible modern technologies that we have access to get new insights into diseases that really can translate into treatments for patients directly in the hospital, using them on tissue from patients is incredibly important. I will just say, bluntly, there is no substitute for that kind of tissue. We could have all the money in the world, all the funding, but the tissues that the patients, through their generosity, provide to these programs, to the labs through our program, really, there's no other way to get it other than patient generosity. It's not something you can buy. It's really only through the generosity of the families and the donors that we can do this kind of advanced work. So yeah,
Yeah. Now, many of our listeners, when they think of donations, they have on their license, I'm a donor. Something happens to me, and for some people, the fear of doing it is mistrust, because they're saying if I show up and they are corrupt, people can be corrupt. They can maybe take an organ or something that is in perfectly good shape. So when we deal with your program in terms of donations, it's not on the back of a license. And you have to sign up for it, and you have to probably be screened. And so some of the regulations for that.
Well, so thank you for bringing that up. First of all, I'd like to say that, I wish I could say that those concerns and those suspicions were completely without foundation and misplaced. But as you already pointed out, there's a long history that goes and even more involved than we have time to go into here, of really unethical behavior that continues to this day. As recently as last year, there were all kinds of news items about people buying and selling, human tissue in completely unethical ways. So you're absolutely right. That is a concern. We know that we operate in this environment, and the trust of the community is absolutely essential for us. We do have a consent form that we use for anyone who wants to donate. Very long consent, unfortunately, but we try to cover all of those areas that you mentioned. So not only, what is going to be done with the tissue that you donate, but what rights do you have? After you donate your tissue, do you have the right to withdraw your consent? Or is there any risk of harm? Or is there any risk of loss of privacy? We try to be as frank as we can about all of those things. And even if you don't want to sign up afterwards, at least we want you to have all the information that you need to make an informed decision.
That's very good. That's very good. Reverend Clayton, I see you ready.
Dr. Sanchez, I have one question before we move on. Can the patient or the person who has volunteered to be a part of your program, can they be specific as to what tissue they want to be removed or be used for study or not?
Reverend, yeah, that's an excellent question. And that is one of the other things that I should have probably mentioned. So, right, we are absolutely thrilled that people would even consider donation. You can give as much or as little of yourself as you want. So we've had people who have restricted their donations to a particular part of the body or a particular type of tissue, and other people who have just said, please use whatever you like. And that is entirely at their discretion.
Can I also say a word about another sort of unique element about our program that relates to that? We have the way we operate to sort of under the hood is that we are not taking tissues and storing them long term in our program. Instead, we have relationships with researchers across the medical school, and we know what their studies are. And we distribute tissue directly to them. So in other words, that allows us to match donors and what they want to donate with researchers who need those particular things. So if you as a donor have a potential interest in only donating a certain tissue, then the only researcher that we call is one that we know is interested in that tissue. So we are not driven. It's very patient driven. I have a long list of researchers. I want this. I want that. And if a patient wants to donate and it matches up, that's great for that researcher. We are not trying to recruit donors based on the researcher's needs. We are listening to donor desires and finding researchers who can benefit from that donor's particular plan. So I think that really gives us a special sort of a special power to honor donors' desires that way.
So let me ask you a question. Is there a time frame? Because you're using the tissue right away. Whereas in the biorepositories, they could be stocked up for research or for whatever crisis that the Red Cross may have. So when you talk about right away, it's gonna be given to a lab like within a week or a few days?
Reverend, so excellent question. So yes, so one of the reasons that our program exists is not only to match people up and provide sort of unique types of tissue, but to provide tissue that is really of the most possible benefit to research. And one of the ways we do that is to try to keep the interval between the death of the donor and the collection as short as possible. And the reason we do that is because there are certain very important parts of the tissue, DNA, RNA, that are very time sensitive. Any donation is terrific. We try to keep everything in a window of about 12 hours or so between the time of death and the time we actually collect tissue. But the shorter, without intruding on the family's wishes, the shorter we can keep that interval, the better, because it provides options to use all of those techniques that Dr. DeStasio was talking about. So typically what we try to do is within 6 hours or less, do what we need to do and complete what we need to do within 2 hours or so as not to delay any arrangements that the family may have planned.
That's good. No, I think that that's a question that people would be asking, how soon, because people hold on to their departed and they got a lot to figure out other than the insurance policy or how they're going to bury this person, what clothes they're going to wear, and then getting all the family together to have that last look. So it is, I appreciate the fact that you're sensitive to those issues with the families because I think that's going to be important. Now, Dr. Sarpong has been working with the Cultural Ambassadors for a while with the Biodepository Program. And one of the things that he was working with us with is how do we get more exposure? How do we get the word out? How do we deal with any hesitancy? And this is like his field. He knows what I'm bringing him to a field he is a master in. So you want to talk to us? And then the other interesting thing is, you see, in a biorepository, the tissue can mount up. So, it's like, do I want to wait and give it in a bank form, or do I want them to take it right away? And I think that's one of the things that, it may be against your team is time. When you say, like right away, it's like it has that kind of, quickness about it that makes you think you're not even get a chance to mourn your dead. But anyway, Dr. Sapon.
Well, thank you, Reverend Perry and Reverend Clayton. And also, I feel blessed and privileged to be in the presence of Dr. Sanchez and his team. In terms of this topic, I think the work we've been doing in the space of biorepository, which basically looking at biorepository research was basically commissioned by Dean Brown. In terms of how do we come up with a guidance document to inform and to accelerate this work in this space, but being thoughtful and making sure that the community voice is at the table. And so what I'm going to share is more of one in terms of listening to community, what their concerns are, and I think ways that we could sort of improve that. The other piece, I think, is that under the larger umbrella of biorepository, there are some that the specimens are taken maybe during research, not waiting until the person has passed, or sometimes it's after they've engaged with the health system and there's leftover specimen, and that specimen can then be used for research. But then there's the part that Dr. Sanchez and his team works on, one that is donated after the person has passed. But I think the common thread in all of this is that I think there needs to be more education with community to address some of the very questions that you brought up and have been answered by Dr. Sanchez. And that has to do with really having more communication and educating people as to what happens to the specimen, how the specimens, are acquired, who gets it, and the fact that, all the sensitivity around family members, when people are grieving, there's a lot of emotions going on. And so putting all of those things to rest, I think it's going to increase people's understanding and therefore maybe increase participation. But I think the other piece I think it's really important is that as we move more and more towards precision medicine and personalized medicine, it's so important that specimen donation increases, particularly in communities or in populations that hasn't really participated, because a lot of these models that are going to be developed for precision medicine is only going to be informed by the data. So if our information is not in there, those models are not going to work for us. So the gaps that we're seeing in healthcare and health outcomes, if it's even going to widen because these models are not going to be accurate for certain segments of the population. But I like the way it was put, it's really people giving up themselves, and it's really a gift because you can't really buy this stuff. And so as people see that, and understand that, I think that we'll be all encouraged to participate. But I think the other part where we've fallen short and listening to just community members articulate their concern is that as researchers, we have not done a good job in going back to tell community what the benefit of giving of themselves has advanced medical science. I mean, most people take medicine and they don't think about how that medicine came into being. But somebody had to participate in a study. Somebody had to give of him or herself. And through that discovery, now we can certain things that was impossible are now possible now. So being mindful and going back and educating folks, I think is really important. And lastly, for brevity, I would say this: I was involved in COVID in Louisiana before coming to Connecticut and to Yale, and when we would talk with community members and focus groups and everything else, when we met the next group, I would always made it a point to summarize what we had learned thus far and say, this is what we're learning from the community. This is what the community is telling us. And then they're more open to give more information because they at least feel we're listening and we're giving that feedback in terms of what we're hearing. So I think we have to do a much better job in sharing what we're learning and giving the credit to the folks who are giving of themselves, that they're part of this endeavor and we're not doing it by ourselves. We may have the technical know-how, but they're giving of themselves for us to bring those two to bear, to be able to improve human conditions and to, improve health outcomes and close the gap.
Thank you. I want our listeners to also know that Dr. Sarpong has been out to the church and did forums with his team just to get the voice of the community. And I think the more the community can see you and hear you in the flesh, the better opportunities for them to ask their questions and to probably participate, because now they have an understanding of what it is they're participating in. I mean, it's very hard to ask people to participate in something that you haven't broken down to the level where they can really understand and appreciate. So maybe one of the questions as a follow-up question is, can you tell us of some of the bio breakthroughs in your work, that the work that you've done that has brought about, changes in healthcare, precision and otherwise? People don't know, but I know there's a history to it, or you wouldn't be doing it. So if you could just tell them, maybe how it's being used, some of the breakthroughs that have come because of this work, I think that helps people love more the process.
Sure, I can speak to a little of that. So, the one field that comes to mind immediately is the field of cancer research. There's been tremendous progress in treating cancer over the last few decades. And one big idea in cancer, that's actually a very old idea, that has come back around with modern understanding, is the idea of using the immune system to fight against tumors, training a patient's own immune cells to attack cancer cells. And this falls very much within precision medicine. And we have used tissues from our donors to investigate the particular signals that go between cancer cells and immune cells that either sort of ramp up or put the brakes on the immune system. And it's a powerful tool, but it's a complicated tool in medicine, and understanding how that works in each patient for different tumor types and so on is a big job. And these tissue samples have enabled us to take further steps in getting better details around how that process works of taking tumor cells, taking immune cells and redirecting them towards the tumor. I'm speaking a lot about the immune system because that's what I work on. But another one is in Alzheimer's disease. We are starting to understand how the immune system contributes and how inflammation in the brain, sort of low grade, a little bit of inflammation, contributes to the cognitive effects in Alzheimer's disease, and that's an ongoing project. And I will highlight one more one more field is macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness in the elderly. And we have been able to do a lot of work on retinas from patients affected by macular degeneration, and start to understand how that disease initiates and progresses. And so, I point out all of these just to illustrate how broad across medicine, these benefits are felt. And a single donor, in many cases, their tissues could contribute to all of those lines of research and really a bunch of others too. I could spend the rest of this program talking about all these different things. So I'll stop there, but it's very broad.
If I could just add, I mean, something that I was fascinated by, we don't do that sort of research currently here, but there is a program, I believe it's the City of Hope program out in California, that works with the community, the AIDS community, basically. As you know, AIDS now with antiretroviral therapy is the sort of thing that you can lead a long life with, but you can never completely eradicate the virus. And there are people who are actively trying to figure out where the virus is in these people who have undetectable virus. It's somewhere, but they don't know where. And if they can figure that out, they're hoping that they can find a way to completely eradicate it. So there's just endless applications. And again, this is not the kind of tissue that you can get any other way. This is not the sort of thing that is available through surgery or any other way. This is only through the generosity of people who donate tissue.
What methods have you used to outreach to the community? I know you're doing it today. That's a great move. But are there other ways that you're doing it now that people can tag into? Like, do you have a Facebook page or Twitter or anything like that? Or you've got a newsletter? So that how would people know to reach you?
So, one of the things that has amazed us, or as, me anyway, I thought that when we started this program 2 years ago, that most of the donors would come to us through the clinicians who took care of them, their physicians. They would be identified through them, and they would, express a desire to contribute, and then they would refer them to us. That hasn't been the case. I think maybe 1 or 2 of our donors have come to us that way. Most of the other people who have donated to the program have found us. And I have to say that we have not done, in my opinion, as good a job as we could have reaching out to the community. We'd have a website. So, I mean, if you look up the Yale Legacy Tissue Donation Program online, there is a website that gives you contact information and some of the basics. But again, you'd have to know to look for it. And somehow there are people who are motivated enough to donate that they've gone through the trouble to go ahead and find that. And we're trying to address that. So you're absolutely right. We can go into this more if you'd like, but we've gone back and we've looked at our donors to date, and who they are, and where they come from. And we realize that we're not reaching, broad swaths of the community, and we'd like to improve that. So through the Yale Cancer Center, We have we have the help of two community research fellows, Angelique Pollard and Ariana Washington, who are trying to help us do some outreach. We're trying to put together a survey. So we are interested in finding out some of the opinions that people have about this kind of research and some of the reservations that they might have about it. So we'd like to administer that survey, to as many people as we can, and use that information to try to tailor our approach to sort of outreach. And then, of course, the reverends here and then the cultural ambassadors have been an enormous help in trying to put together a program.
Before we move on, I need to just share this with you. Are listening to the YCCI Community Health Watch Show on WNHH 103.5 on your FM dial.
Thank you.
Great place.
All right. Right on time, Doc. I wanted to ask you a question about the the program in a little more detail. Youth can, with their parents' permission, or is 18 and above?
So 18 and above can, ideally, what we'd like is for people, 18 and older who are thinking about this to contact us and walk through the consent and have a consent on file. In some cases, people have come to us because their loved one has, for example, advanced Alzheimer's disease, had always wanted to donate, but wasn't able to now give consent personally. So we have a mechanism to get consent from the next of kin. And we also have a mechanism, we've had one donor who was under the age of 18, and we have a mechanism to get consent through the parents or guardians of those donors.
Dr. Sarpong, how successful was your project? And what were some of the hiccups?
Well, I think initially, I'll start with maybe the hiccups. Initially, I think in doing some of our listening sessions, and before we actually went to the community, we had to summit, basically the Biorepository Research Summit. And we had Dr. Consuelo Wilkins, who's at Vanderbilt, who was our keynote. And we also had various breakout groups where they deliberated on what they wanted to see, things that we needed to consider, some of the concerns that they had. I think initially when we started, I think the very first meeting, it wasn't very smooth. We started the conversation and the community took it over, and it was all about their concerns and issues. But I would frame it as it was a good first meeting, since we felt that it was important for them to get what their concerns were out in the open. And I think us knowing what their concerns are made us better prepared to go in for the second and the third sessions. And I think as much as sometimes we're concerned about hearing the negative, I think the negative is also good with the positive, because you can only improve when you know what you're not doing right? They said Tiger Woods gets a coach not because his coach is a better golfer, but because the coach is able to tell him what he could do to improve his game. So sometimes you need that negative feedback. And so by us hearing the concerns, and most of it centered around trust issues or bad experiences that they had had in the past with others. But we also needed to assure them it's a new day and that we're here to work collaboratively to bring about a change that would better all of us, be for the betterment of all of us. So I think that I wouldn't even say that was a hiccup. I think that was a learning experience for us. And we're considering all of that in putting together this guidance document, that this is the voice of the community. These are the concerns they have. And this will help us better provide better information or educational packages or learnings for the community. It also, I think, was a good learning for us as researchers. And I'll say this, I'll share an experience I have, and this has been some of my guiding principle. I work with the Jackson Heart Study, which is the largest epidemiological study looking at cardiovascular disease among African Americans in Jackson, Mississippi. And we had a speaker who came in and spoke about genetics, you know, the social aspects, the legal aspects, the ethical issues. And at the end of the talk, we were all in the hallway socializing. And the speaker asked one of the participants, who was an elderly woman, that were you concerned with all the stuff that I shared with you in my presentation? And I was standing next to the PI of the study, and we were all chatting, and she turned to us, pointing to us, and she told the speaker, she said, "No, I'm not a bit concerned because these people got our back." And from that day on, every decision I had to make, because I was I was a coordinating center director, I had to think about, is this decision going to break this trust that the community has placed upon us? So that became a guiding principle for me that, you know, in doing this kind of work, we have to uphold the trust of the people. So I think it's good to learn these things. I think it's good to hear what the community have to say. And then I think we're better prepared to have dialogue, because I think once understanding prevails, then people are likely to engage and participate. You know, they say when people sometimes tell you no, it's not because they just say they don't want to do or go along. They just say they need more information. So no, it's not a bad thing all the time. Sometimes it's a way of saying I need more information to make a better decision. You know.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sarpong. That's what we needed to know. And you know, it's important to know that we always say we have to be where the community is, but I don't think we really understand what that means. That also means physically being where
Right.
the community is. You know, you can say, "Oh, you know, I'm with the community." You know, my heart. No, you know, they have to see you, and so events like the Q House or the health fair that we're doing on the 27th, or Amos's 3 health fairs at the Community Action Program in New Haven, gives people an awareness of that it's transparent, and that you're there to answer hard questions with them, that you're not afraid, that you're not hiding behind the tent saying, I hope they don't stop and ask me what this is all about, because it might be too depressing. And then the other thing is, you know, our young community health workers who like in their 20s and early 30s, they phenomenal getting out and getting the message to people and training. Some work in the emergency room, some work with um, you know, CAP agencies, some work with other religious groups, and then we have them that they also work with us and for us. So, you know, you might want to look into them also. Because, you know, and here's the other thing, culture, religion is faith clothed in culture. And so the problem is most of the time it's not the religion, it's the culture. And in this culture, you know, in the African American culture in particular, uh, the grave robbing experience is in their DNA, but more so in the New Testament, they're told that the rapture will come and the dead will rise to meet him. And people think that in our community, if they have given away some parts, they're not going to be able to meet him. That's an ontological kind of study that they do. They won't be able to meet the Savior because they believe in a bodily resurrection. So the younger people are more into cremation now because they don't care. They really don't care. You can take this body. When I'm done, hey, that's fine. So finding the mix between, your younger group and your older group, and then being able to give kind of literature and conversation, that will help, whether it's not today, tomorrow, but it will help. And I think in this field, like most fields, people used to didn't talk about cancer. It was a curse word. But the more people talk about it, the more lives these researchers are able to save. So, we got to get that word out. And I think that's one of the things we can help you do. But this radio station here, 103, it's a community radio station and people are listening. And they're just looking now for, that collaboration and leadership that you guys can help bring. The Reverend, Doc, I'm giving him a title of Reverend. Hold on, let me back that up. Dr. Sarpong is coming out with the document. I'm sure that's going to be helpful not only to you guys, but to all of us in terms of the research that they have discovered. Reverend Sarpong is a little shy sometimes. He wants to shout, but he holds back his shout. But he's a good man, and he is a statistician, and he can get the kind of results I think they're looking for. But I think this is awesome. This is awesome. I think the trust level has to be addressed, the culture has to be addressed, and the class. Like you say, older people who got money. You may not have said that, but older people who are well-to-do understand how valuable this work is. Why is that different from other groups? And maybe we can learn something from just the work we do at trying to figure this out, because that could help us in so many other ways as well.
Yeah, I'd like to
Do we
say,
have any? Yes. Go ahead.
Dr. Sarpong's work. I mean, I know you're trying to put together guidelines for biorepositories, but your work I think is going to be really important. We are also trying to, use our community outreach work and study it and hopefully put it in peer-reviewed literature, because I think there are other programs out there that are looking to start up similar work, and I think they should know, basically they should learn from other programs to get the community involved early.
Yes.
I think we went about it, we started on the research side and now we're reaching out to the community. I think really the opposite approach is probably more what you want to do. You want to get, the input of the community when you begin, when you start. I mean, if it was possible to have a community advisory board to help you put together your program, that would be ideal. I mean, this way you're not, sort of trying to play catch up on these sort of things.
Yeah.
I think guidelines and sort of experience papers are going to be helpful, not only for us, but for people who are trying to put together their own programs elsewhere.
Thank you, and we'll work with you. We'll need to get together and see ways that the Office of Health Equity Research can work with your team to sort of assist in ways that we can help promote. I think it's so important that sometimes we think it's time consuming, but the benefit of it, the ROI on it, if it's done properly and sincerely, I think it's far more than any of us can conceive. And I'll just share experiences. I try to kind of make my point based on the experiences. With the Jackson Heart Study, at one point we were struggling with recruitment. But we had what we call the Council of Elders, and these were ladies who were part of the precursor to the Jackson Heart Study, which was the ERIC study, which is the atherosclerosis risk in communities. And Jackson was one of the 4 sites. These ladies formed what they call the Red Hat Society on their own. Nobody paid them. And every other Sunday or every Sunday, they would get together. There were about 8 or 10 of them, and they all wear red hats, and they'll visit a church, and they sat together. And so the pastor couldn't help but recognize them and ask them who they were. And they would say, we're with the Jackson Heart Study. And they would just put a plug in for the Jackson Heart Study. So they on their own were actually doing outreach, and they called themselves the Red Hat Society. So there are ways when community really buys into the mission. They'll go on their own to put the word out, and they have more credibility than researchers because they don't have a dog in the fight. So people are likely to believe them more, you know, and they'll say, well, we're a part of the Jackson Heart Study, and they'll tell about the experience, and that carries a lot of weight, you know. So I think there's ways that we can enhance the research. The research is important. It's what has brought us all this far, you know, and improve the conditions and well-being of society. And so it is important that we keep the fire burning with that.
I mean, I think in addition to the, and again, very understandable mistrust that's out there in the community, there's a lot of goodwill. I mean, we have been just floored by the generosity and the work that people have done to find us and to contribute. We think that there's probably more out there. And I think this is the perfect antidote to some of the history behind this. I think that people in the past who used unethical methods of getting their hands on things weren't interested in the community's input or didn't have confidence in the community to participate in things. And it turns out that, well, you know, that's just misplaced. I mean, there's plenty of goodwill out there in the community. We just need to go out and find it.
Yeah, and I think you have to get the results. You have to tell them what the program really does, how it really makes a difference. Because if you don't, it's just like they'll think you're out there trying to just make your program a success for you or your private benefit. But when you can get out there and tell people exactly what it is, oh, that makes a big difference. And I think the education is a large part. Now, our exposure program, we've got these young people from high school to first, second year college, where they can take a subject like this, and in 4 weeks, they could turn this upside down. I'm serious, because I've seen them do work with COVID. I've seen them do work with cancer, work with writing books, work with high school students. And so you probably need you probably got to, I think all of us are going to have to learn how to use AI and use the social media channels and pages in order to get the word out. But, you know, sometimes you start slow. So I notice you have some people you're working with now in Waterbury and some other people. And one of the things, the suggestions I had, that you can get as many clergy people, send them a letter, ask them to put it in the bulletin. Anyone wants to discuss or have a coffee hour or meeting to talk about it. And if you did every church, I used to sell real estate, you gotta get one person. At least one person. If you don't get one person after hitting 4 or 5 churches and nursing homes and community centers, then maybe there's a problem bigger than the ones we're looking at, you know?
Can I just pick up on that idea of transparency?
Yes.
You know, that is something that has been very important to this program from the get-go. And I think, you know, while we want to see what particular information, you know, the community is most important or most interested in hearing, the idea of transparency and information, informed consent, you know, is obviously a big word for us. You know, we spent a lot of time with lawyers, you know, setting this program up, and for a particular purpose, and that is setting up this unique element where we can do informed consent prior to death. So it's not at the time of death when when things are complicated,
right. Yes.
Plans are being made, and these conversations are often cut short or happen in the not ideal way. What we're able to do, because it's legally structured as similar to an organ donation, which you consent to prior to death, we are you know, in most situations, we are able to do this well in advance when there's time to work these questions into the planning that a donor and their family is doing. And so that allows, because there's a lot of information there about what research is done and what the risks and benefits are. And those are long and important conversations. And I think, you know, I would say we're very proud of the fact that we have created a space way ahead of time for those conversations because we think that that is very important to get this right for each donor. It's
Right.
not a one size fits all, and so being able to give each donor and their family information, time to process that information, call us back with questions. All of this it's a process. All of this
Right.
process.
Right.
That's an important element that we really value.
It's important when you were talking about this, I was thinking what would be the focal point for the community? And I think our focal point is family. And like you said, many of your customers are repeated from the family, right? Repeats from others that have worked with you in the past. So I think that's when you do your outreach, your flyers and your notices, you got to think about, do I put a couple up here too? Do I put a family picture here? Or do I just put a single individual? And you may want to mix them up. But I think that's a great insight to see, yeah. How do we reach? Because your marketing has already told you part of where your success is. Now you're trying to build up other partners in that to balance it out and make equity possible. And I think that's awesome.
And another piece and continuation with this conversation, when you speak of families, uh, families have certain funeral homes that they
Right.
are used to using. Uh, when I was in Plainville, I think some people felt that they couldn't go to heaven unless this certain guy prepared their body. so, so, so it's important that we consider that funeral homes that a family is familiar with. There would also have to be a part of this particular program to get some people to buy in. And yeah, that's enough.
And I also just wanted to add, I know, Reverend Perry, you talked about culture, but the use of language is also very critical in terms of reaching folks. And I'm just reminded during COVID, and we were thinking about doing articles and, educational materials and flyers. And one of the things we quickly learned, at least for the brown and black community, is don't use vaccination, use shots. Have you had your shots? The word vaccination had a negative connotation. So all our publications, all our flyers had, have you had your shots? So again, use of language is really critical. So, maybe in thinking about this and engaging community, we learn what word would resonate with folks or terminologies or the way we frame things, because it may resonate with one group if it's said one way, but another group it may be a little different. So use of language is really critical.
Yeah. And I think, in targeting your outreach too is important. Whether you're looking for, like, you go to churches, senior centers, or community centers, or major groups like NAACP and other groups. Everybody seems like they're working now on health equity, regardless of what's going on in the White House. Everybody's really trying to get health up and to where it needs to be. So we got to push forward with this as well and try to educate people and recruit people for studies so that precision medicine and other forms of medicine can reach its true potential. I thank you guys for being on today, because I'm hoping that our community will be looking you up online and calling you and will be beneficiaries of the great work that you're doing. So anyone has last comments? Harry told me we got about 2 minutes left.
Now, all I wanted to say is we want to hear from the community. So any way that they can give us their feedback, what they felt about this particular section, what would they would have wanted to see differently or hear differently, I think would be important. And because this work is so important and we have to continue to do this work. To improve the lives of and the health outcomes of all Americans, we have to close the gap. And however we frame it, it's not important, but we need to close the gap for everybody to have the best shot of living their best life while they're on this side of the fence.
Yeah, yes. Clayton?
Let's do our guest first, Dr.
Uh,
Dr. Sanchez. And
Well, I mean, I'd just like to thank you again for so much for having us on. This is really very helpful. And please, as Dr. Sarpong said, we'd love to hear from the community. We will try to be out in the community with surveys and whatnot. But if you want to find us on our website, we want to hear it, good, bad, or indifferent. I mean, even if it's bad feedback, we want feedback. So we'd love to hear from you.
Sounds good. All right. Again, we thank you. And maybe we can come back and do that second show with the historian you were talking about bringing on. And we can look at maybe some reasons we're at levels of mistrust.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right. I thought we had 2 minutes left. Maybe we
but
have.
listen. I really want to take this opportunity to thank our guests for sharing this much needed information to our audience. It has certainly helped me. I'm pretty sure it has helped our listeners. And we look forward to meeting with you again in the near future. It has been a pleasure. And our host, Dr. Perry, we thank you as well.
All right. Thank you.
You're listening to the Community Health Watch Show on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, your home for community radio. Stay informed, stay connected, and take charge of your health. We'll see you again next time.